Hi, everybody. Welcome along to this special edition of SportsView, where we will be discussing all things tennis with Pavvy G, as he's known as Pavvy Gill, is it?
That's correct. Yeah, that's my name.
Welcome, Pavvy, and great to have you on the show.
Pleasure to be here, and lovely to speak to you, and welcome to all your listeners as well.
Excellent, thank you. And we've been checking up on you on social media. We're trying to get a bit of scandal on you, but we're still searching. But anyway, you're delighted to have you. But you're a big fan of tennis, and you're a big fan of Novak Djokovic in particular. And we'll start. Actually, where did you grow up yourself?
So I'm born and bred in the UK. My parents came over from India as immigrants, but I was born and bred in a place called Derby, which is probably a couple of hours north of London, just for context there.
Yes. Derby County. Yeah, we have a few followers of Derby County, and
yes, I'm a big Derby County fan as well. Which
Wayne Rooney was there for a while. Yeah, remember?
Yes, he was. Yeah, indeed.
I think he did a reasonable job myself.
Yeah.
And tell me, how did you get interested, or what piqued your interest in tennis?
So in terms of when I kind of finished university, I used to like playing a lot of sports, but I kind of focused specifically on tennis just because I found that it was probably one of the more quicker sports to play in terms of time. It didn't take that much long, but I really enjoyed watching it as well. So growing up as a kid, I loved watching kind of Agassi, Sampras, McEnroe. I think that was, in the late 80s is really when I started watching tennis. But I started getting more into it when I started playing it. So that was probably around 2002 after I'd graduated from university. So I really kind of picked up tennis in the era of Sampras, Agassi, and the Roddick, and Federer was just starting to really dominate the game. Henman as well, and the Brits were starting to get a few good players. So my passion in terms of watching and following it probably stemmed about 20 years ago.
Excellent. Now we're just going to put in a clip here for us to start the chat about.
Djokovic is the champion in Cincinnati once more.
7-6, 7-6.
A 39th Masters title, surely one of the most remarkable of those finals. That is a match we will remember for a very long time.
Now, Novak, of course, has some. I mean, we could spend the next 3 or 4 hours easily looking at the highlights of his absolutely untouchable career, in my opinion. But that Masters title, I think, struck a note with all tennis fans, all good, positive tennis fans, because of the way the man was treated last year and the year before. It was just, to me, I despaired watching some of the stuff, the way he was treated in Australia, and indeed Wimbledon as well. They could hang their head in shame the way they treated all the tennis players last year for that. But I dare say, Pavvy, you were watching that Cincinnati final.
Yeah, I mean, it was phenomenal. It was the longest Masters final in history. The world number 1 and 2, obviously the much vaunted Alcaraz going against the King Djokovic, and a lot of people after Wimbledon had said that Djokovic was now past his best, and it was the changing of the guards, and we've now got a new king, and his name is Alcaraz. So there was a lot on the line. It was almost like a big boxing match, really, where you go head to head, the top 2 in the world. The older, more experienced player against the younger and inexperienced player, and everyone had almost kind of written Djokovic off after he lost Wimbledon and said, well, he's too old now. He's 36. Alcaraz is 20. There's just no way that he can compete with him physically more than anything. And then for the way the match unfolded, obviously the start of the match, Djokovic did look his age, and he struggled immensely with the heat.
Yeah, so the humidity,
the humidity was like 35, 36. I heard fans were fainting as well. So it was really, really hot. He really struggled. And Alcaraz took advantage of his, 16 years, his junior, and he raced to a lead. It looked as though it was going to finish in an hour in a straight sets, straightforward match. And the reason why it was so unbelievable is that Djokovic turned it around from 7-5, 4-2 down against Alcaraz. He completely turned it around. He found that something that he's always found in his career. He just never gives in. He never gives up. And that's kind of why it meant so much to me, and why, even on a work night, that I stayed up past 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure I watched the end of it.
I was watching on the Tennis Channel I think Jim Courier is an excellent commentator. I think he's a fantastic commentator. He's middle of the road, and he gives credit where credit is due, not like some other commentators we won't mention. But I mean, through the second set, when I was watching that, I was looking at Novak and I was saying to myself, I mean, we're always taught in any sport, the next point is the important one. You can't do anything about the last one because it's last constant. And I thought through the second set, I don't know what it was. He probably decided, if I'm going out, I'm going to go out with all my guns blazing. But he served for the set a number of times. And I was still, of course, when the tiebreak came, he seemed to be, I think the tiebreak psychologically energized him in the second set.
It did, absolutely. And I think, you hit the nail on the head there, really. I think, with what we got used to as being a fan of Djokovic is he never gives up. You've talked about his adversity that he's faced in America and the US and Australia, and even the UK. And, he's been through a lot recently. And, I think that's given him even more strength and inner belief to say that, if I can be in Australia locked up unlawfully, and chucked out of a country where I was allowed in legally, I can go deep in this match. And I'm sure there was times where he thought, maybe I don't want to keep going. The US Open is just around the corner, so he may want to conserve his physicality and make sure he doesn't get any worse. But that's just not his DNA. And he just thought, I'm going to fight. I'm going to make Alcaraz win the match. I'm not going to give it to him. And that's kind of what changed the match, in that I think everyone thought, even a lot of the fans, and I mentioned as well, it was a little bit disappointing, but I think a lot of the fans thought he was just going to lie down and roll over. And Alcaraz, I think, probably got that in his head in the second set, where he was hitting a few showboating shots. I think probably, playing a little bit to the crowd, because he probably thought the match was done. Way that Novak was playing, he thought it was done. And that's why it meant a lot to us for the way he turned it around.
Well, I mean, Djokovic has been through the wars on many occasions anyway, match-wise in different matches down through the years. So he had that reserve to call on, I mean, you obviously have to remind you that Alcaraz himself, all the matches he played were three-setters. Win the full distance. People should look back at that, Every match he had to win. I don't mean that blasé, but it nailed his colours to the mast. But that was good for him as well, as a tennis player, in the evolution of his game as well,
Yeah, I mean, he spent 10 hours on court, which is just a phenomenal record. And Djokovic was on 4 hours. So, his path to the final was relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
And I think we have to give credit and testament to Alcaraz as well, because when Djokovic turned it around and was 5-3 up in the final set, it looked as though then Alcaraz was done. But I think the beauty of the game was that he still never gave up as well. So, he saved match points playing some phenomenal tennis on his serve. Yeah. And then he broke Djokovic. And then all the momentum was back with him. And, as fans, we were just like, and even Novak kind of said in interviews, just like, give up, man, So, I can't praise both of them enough for their fight and their will and their strength, and physical and mental strength.
And I was watching, as I said, like yourself. And when Djokovic won the second set, I said to myself, well, at least now he's redeemed himself in the sense that he's equal. Because anything goes in the decider anyway, and we could see it. But at least he made a statement. He made a statement to himself and to his opponent. I'm here. I'm competing. And out they went. And I still thought it was still a very, very 50-50 game coming into the third set. But as you know, of course, in his background, in his team, is Goran Ivanisevic, who, as we know, in his own career, tried so hard to win Wimbledon. And when he did, I was saying to myself, I remember when he won it, I said, he's going to retire now, surely, because he's reached the top of the mountain. But my grandson, who's a man now, he's living in Poland. My mum, who's passed away now, his granny raised him really because his mum was working, but she was a tennis fanatic.
Right.
And she taught him at the age of 4, I think, or 5, to say Goran Ivanisevic.
Oh, fantastic.
He could say
Fantastic.
the name absolutely crystal clear. And as a result, his nickname to the very day is Vich.
Oh, well, that's amazing.
So, I mean, that's just a little anecdote of.
It's a lovely story, and you know, it's a small word because growing up, Goran was one of my favourites, and you know, I just love the way he served, and I just love the way he kind of went about the game, and the fact that he's now years later Novak's coach is, you know, it's kind of worked well. So it's a great fit.
Yeah, it is actually, and I think that was a fantastic marriage, if you like, between Ivanisevic and Novak, because I mean, as I said last year, but as we know now, the US Open is beginning next Monday. The US Open is beginning next Monday, and what I'm going to say is that obviously after this Cincinnati match, I mean, he was always in the frame anyway. That's Novak, but I mean, I think he's very much in the frame now after this display in Cincinnati, because this man, look, I can't explain it humanly how the man copes when you look at where he was last year and the year before. When you look at the humiliation, the unnecessary humiliation that was visited upon him, like, and the arrest and the confine. I mean, really, mentally speaking, personally, you can only relate it to yourself. I know myself. That would nearly probably have finished my career, and if I was him, you know, because that was dreadful, Pavvy. When you saw the photographs and you saw the coverage, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was horrific, and you know, I was very much part of kind of listening to the team, and I knew exactly what Djokovic went through in Australia, and it took him a good few months to recover from that. So it wasn't just Novak. Yelena, his wife, suffered immensely. His family, his friends, his fans, obviously, you know, we all lived and breathed through what he went through, and it did impact him. You know, I think everyone sees Djokovic so strong mentally in tennis, but that did break him. And like you said, I mean, I've said it on Twitter a few times as well, but a lot of players wouldn't have come back from that. It would have just been enough, especially at his age as well. He doesn't need that. It was awful targeting of him, really, and you know, hindsight's a great thing, but that they made a huge error, and he's never really had a full apology from that from anyone.
No.
And
nobody.
It was a huge burden, and you know, Novak's been through a war-torn childhood, and you know, he's even said that what happened to him in Australia was even tougher than living through a war. So that gives you an idea of what he felt and how lonely he felt and how isolated he was, and how much they tried to destroy him mentally, and you know, everything that was said and done about him was with the aim to try and finish his tennis career, in my opinion. And that's why every win, every major title that he wins is celebrated so much more now. I mean, so much more because of what's happened to him.
Yeah, and I can say that the wider tennis community can hang their head in shame as well.
Yes,
I mean, there was a stony silence from people who you would expect that would be on a human rights level, the mind of tennis on a human rights level. The authorities, you know, would want to stand up and say, this is one of our members, our most illustrious members. That shocked me as much as the political rubbish that went on in Australia, you know. But let's bring you back to a happy time.
Brings back goosebumps to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was never there, unfortunately. Maybe that's on my bucket list to be at Centre Court on any final day, really, men's or women's. But I, I can't grasp really, Pavvy, to be there yourself. And of course, the match itself was such an emotional game, really. You know.
It was. I think that Wimbledon clip was just a few months after what happened to him on Australia. So that meant a lot to him. It meant a lot to us, and obviously, he didn't have a great reception, really, a bit of a mixed reception in Wimbledon. So it meant a lot to all of his fans and to him. And you can just see the emotion of how much it meant to him and to his fans and he was very unlucky not to win this year as well, but winning against Kyrgios the way he did last year and against Berrettini the year before was just was phenomenal and he's great memories for me. It brings me goosebumps. It's my pinned tweet on Twitter. So
I mean,
great memories for me.
I mean, the Wimbledon final that's just gone this year could have gone his way as well, because as we know, it went. I mean, there was a time when Alcaraz threatened to win it in straight sets, if you know what I mean, But nevertheless, I mean, Novak came back, as we know, and he went to the fifth set. So that's a 50-50 set.
He did. And by his own admission, he didn't play particularly well. I think the main thing on grass is you've got to serve well. And Novak didn't serve well that day. I think he struggled with the wind, which we know in his career he's always been blighted in windy conditions and extreme heat conditions. And that's what we saw in Cincinnati. And unfortunately for him in Wimbledon, there was some matches that were played under the roof. That would have suited him. I think if it was under the roof like other matches were, he would have won that. But he struggled with the wind. That impacted his serve. And on grass, if your serve isn't firing, then you're not going to be playing at your best ability. So I don't think he was at his best, but credit where credit is due to Alcaraz as well. There's a lot of pressure on him as well, and he still has to go out and perform, and he did. So I'm not taking anything away from Alcaraz's victory, but Djokovic, by his own admission, was not anywhere near his best at Wimbledon, and that would have given him a lot of confidence because he knew that he wasn't at his best, and he still nearly won.
And
that's huge confidence.
And as I said, it went to the fifth set. But Novak himself, I thought myself in Cincinnati that in the first set and nearly all of the second set, his first service was very poor.
It was. I think he with Novak during the week in Cincinnati, he'd been playing at night all week.
He had.
All conditions. I think he was shocked as well, and the last player you want to face in really hot and sticky conditions is Alcaraz because he forces you around the courts, he pushes you from side to side. So I think Novak really struggled physically with the immense heat as well, and obviously the service is the most aggressive and impactful shot in tennis, so that was naturally going to take a lot of the brunt of the fatigue and the tiredness and the illness that the heat was causing him.
Well, when you look at it, I suppose, in the cold facts for the match, the first set, even though Novak's first service was gone, and even though the heat was getting him, even though all those negatives for him, nevertheless, it went to 7-5.
Yeah, still very close set.
And it was only a point away from being 6-all at tiebreak. So, I mean, really, we don't want to be too hard on them after all.
No.
There's 16 years between them. Let's not forget that either,
No, absolutely. And it doesn't really get spoken about, which annoys me with, I do get annoyed with a lot of the Western mainstream tennis media because I remember when Federer was in his 30s and they would always say, how is he doing this in his 30s? And Djokovic is 36. And yet hardly any of the media have mentioned that he was 16 years younger than Alcaraz and still managed to ultimately physically and mentally outlast him, which is a phenomenal achievement.
And I think that, who do you not fear, but who do you think on the hardcourt now in the US? I mean, obviously, Yannick Sinner would come into the picture, I think. Would he?
I think so. I think before this match, it was Alcaraz for me. I personally think that loss has given Novak a huge psychological edge over Alcaraz.
Yeah,
I think some people are saying that he's not going to be mentally impacted by that. I play tennis, not at a professional level, but at an amateur
yeah,
level. I've had tough losses like that where I've missed match points or should have won, and it does impact you, and you start thinking about that the next match you play against the same opponent. So
yeah.
I think Djokovic has struck a really big psychological blow there, and I think the way that they celebrated and the way that Alcaraz was upset, I think they knew that it meant more than just the title. It's got quite a big and intense rivalry already. And so I don't like making many predictions online, but I don't think Alcaraz will now win the US Open. That doesn't mean to say that Novak will, because there's a lot of other good players. And in the US Open, you've got to think, for me, the Americans always come into play. So, Taylor Fritz, Francis
Yeah.
Tiafoe, they're best tennis.
I lost a few euro on Taylor Fritz a couple of tournaments ago. I mean, I fancied him, but really, you have to be pretty consistent to win a major, to win a Grand Slam. Fritz has game. There's no doubt about it. He has the game. He has the shots. He has all the weapons to win it. But consistency to me is another thing. He seems to lose concentration too often for my liking, to really.
No, I agree.
Yeah, but he's a talented player. On his day, he'd beat Djokovic. He'd beat Alcaraz on his day.
Yeah, I think that's the key between the rest of the field now, Pat, is that Djokovic and Alcaraz are the ones that bring their best games in the most important matches and the majors, and the players that are now falling behind are the likes of your Fritz and Tsitsipas, who, on their day, like you said, they can beat anyone on their day, but can they bring that to the most important matches, the semi-finals of slams, the finals of slams? Yeah. And at this stage, the only two players on the men's tour that are doing that consistently are Djokovic and Alcaraz, and that's why I think they're pulling away from the rest of the field in that aspect, in terms of their consistency.
And a lot of players have come and gone since Novak has been on the scene who were great white hopes. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but people like Dominic Thiem, who was absolutely flying for a few years, but never did it.
So many. I mean, yeah, you got T, you got Medvedev, you got Tsitsipas, you got Zverev, you've got so many youngsters that promise so much. And I think with Thiem, he was a little bit unlucky because he obviously got a bad injury, and he never seemed to have recovered from that. And I know it's been a little bit better, but it's nowhere near the level of standard that he was at, and he's going to be really disappointed with that. Zverev initially struggled after his injury. We have to see if he can get back to that level, because in that US Open that Thiem won, Zverev should have won that. He was 2 sets up, but the nerves got the better of him. And then Medvedev has always had a disappointing season by his standard. And when he won his first slam, a lot of people were saying Medvedev was then going to go on, dominate tennis. He was going to dominate the hard courts. That hasn't really materialized.
No.
Tsitsipas burst onto the scene very young. He won a lot of titles, and everyone thought he would then be a regular slam winner, and that hasn't materialized. And obviously Sinner, that you mentioned earlier as well, he looks that he's got that bit extra, and he's just won his first Masters title last month in Toronto, so I think that's going to give him a confidence. He's still very young, so it'll be interesting to see if he can now translate that and really go deep in a slam, because he's making quarters and semis regularly, but then just seems to not have that game to kind of take it to the final and above.
Absolutely, because I would certainly agree with you that Sinner and Alcaraz and Djokovic for the US Open. Now, obviously, we're saying that, and there's a couple of more, 3 or 4 or 5 more players who have the ability and the game, and if they keep their consistency, they could challenge. Well, we had Berrettini a couple of years ago, but he's after a good few injuries, and he's not the force he was either, but a fabulous player as well on his day, can beat you in a once-off anytime, But you're talking over 2 weeks on the US Open 4, 5, 6, 7 games, and every second or third day. So really, I mean, this is Djokovic's bread and butter. Dare we say it? I mean, how long more can he keep going for?
Yeah, I think this Alcaraz rivalry has actually reignited him. To be honest, I think it's actually given him a few extra years because he's got genuine competition, and we all know that Djokovic loves a challenge. So, I obviously as a fan would want him to keep playing for as long as he can. But if you can give me 2 or 3 years at this level where he wins, continues to win majors, I'll be absolutely delighted.
Yeah.
And obviously at this stage it's important to stay fit as well, both mentally and physically. It's taxing. He's still got a young family, so he has to balance his family life with his work life as well.
We're speaking to Pavvy Gill on SportsView today. Don't forget to press the red button to subscribe to our channel. And we're going to give it, and don't forget to check out Pavvy Gill. We'll put all his information up after this, and he can have all the stalkers he like online after that, But we're going to show another highlight.
He's a perfect 10. Not only champion of Australia for a 10th time, but he is the best player on the planet again. He is not just the heir to greatness. He is greatness.
I think that Australian title, we all know why. That Australian title for Novak, to me, was, you could see him, the emotion. Of course, it's emotional after winning any title, but that one, I mean, he's the only player to have won all the Grand Slams 4 or more times, is he? I think something like that.
3 or more times, yeah. So he's a triple Grand Slam winner. He's the only player that's won all the Masters, not only once, but twice. No other player has won all the Masters, and he's won every Grand Slam 3 times at least. So phenomenal. But yeah, I mean that clip gives me happiness. It gives me emotion. I know how much Australia did to him. I know that he went this year and he wanted to win everything, and he won Adelaide before the Australian Open. And it meant a lot to him. It became more than tennis. And, for him to actually go through that, because he suffered a couple of injuries during that 2 week in Australia, but he managed to kind of fight through it. He was very, very emotional, the most emotional that he's ever been with any title win. And I still think that's singly most important title win because of what happened to him. And if you remember, he was actually banned for 3 years as well. So he had to overturn that decision. So, they wanted him out of Australia for him to come back. And it was also his 10th, which is a big landmark, 10th Australian Open. He tied with Nadal, which he's now obviously gone on and surpassed as well. So it was just, on so many levels. I mean, I didn't sleep much, obviously, being in the UK. The timelines aren't great in Australia.
I know, join the club.
But it was worth every sleepless night, to be honest, just to see that final outcome. Just amazing.
And you've met the man, have you?
I've met Djokovic, yes. I've been lucky to meet him a couple of times at events. I've got to kind of know Jelena really well, which is really surreal. Which she's just appreciative of all the support that I've given to Novak and his team, particularly just kind of dispelling a little bit of the narratives and trying to provide a little bit of balance and context from a tennis point of view. So that's why I try to use my social media, trying to give a little bit of context and balance, which is what we don't get. So yeah, I've been blessed to kind of been introduced to the team, so I know the team, and it's very surreal. I am a tennis fan at the end of the day. I play an amateur level, and I help run a tennis club. But for a superstar and an idol to even know who I am means a lot. I still have to pinch myself that he does, and I'm blessed by that, to be honest.
And I said, I'm speaking with Pavvy Gill now. I said, well, one thing, after we must catch up with you again on our own SportsView program. We have a few heads on every Monday night on the program. I think the Monday after I think the Sunday is the final for the men's competition in the US Open. So we'll hopefully have you on the Monday. It'll be great to have you on for even 10 or 15 minutes on our sports podcast. And I'd love to be there, of course, but anyway, we can't be everywhere. But Pavvy, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Tell me something. I suppose we do expect him to go all the way in the US Open.
Yeah, I think so. As I said, I don't like making predictions because tennis is such a difficult game mentally and physically, and you don't know what's going to happen with circumstances that are beyond your control. But I do feel that the way that Novak has approached the US, he's got a point to prove. And when Novak's got a point to prove, he is most motivated and most focused. And I do think, and I'm trying to be as objective and not as biased, but I do think the US Open. Alcaraz obviously is a threat. Sinner's a threat. Rune's a threat. Medvedev, obviously, is a previous winner. He beat him in the final of 2021, the last time Novak was able to play in the US Open. He will be a threat. Tsitsipas will be a threat. The Americans that we mentioned, TFO, Fritz, they'll be a threat. So, he's got people. It's not going to be a cakewalk. We know that. No slam is a cakewalk. He's going to have to go through the trenches and put his mind, body, heart, on soul on the line again. But I think he has got it in him to do that, and he will find a way over best of five. He's one of the most difficult people to beat over best of five because he figures things out. He's a problem solver, and he's still, bless him, he's still physically and mentally very strong.
I was going to say that he's blessed as well with good health.
He is. He looks after his health impeccably. He stopped all kind of sugar and meat, and I'm not saying that's necessarily the right thing to do, but he does what he thinks is good for his body. And
yes.
Yoga every day. He meditates every day. He does Pilates every day. So his health and fitness is his number one aim. And I think Goran Ivanisevic mentioned it a few months ago that when they were looking at his numbers in terms of fitness levels, they're actually higher now than they were 5 or 6 years ago. So it's almost like he's bucking the trend of growing. He's almost producing better results the older he gets. So so he's still blessed with really good health. He's very fit, and he's still got that motivation, which is what a lot of Novak fans
exactly. That's the hidden ingredient. And I mean, obviously, and he's blessed as well. He hasn't had any really, really serious injury. He's had what we call normal injuries in sport, but he has never had a serious injury like Nadal. No. He's been blessed that way too.
Yeah, I mean, he had the only surgery that he's ever had was in 2017, which is his elbow surgery, and that kept him out for a little while. Since he came back and fit, he's touch wood. He's not had any major, he's not needed any surgery for anything. He's not had any major injuries. He has injury niggles like all athletes do, but yeah, nothing major in the last 6 years for sure.
Before we wrap up, I was going to say, it's disappointing we won't see Nadal. Obviously, from Novak's point of view, it wouldn't be from a sport point of view, from competitive. But it's disappointing that I thought he might have made the US Open. That's Nadal, but it's looking very unlikely that he'll be back at all.
Yeah, I think I wasn't surprised Nadal not missing the US Open. Obviously, he prefers the clay. And I think he also performs better at the Australian Open as well. So, I want to see him back. I want to see, I'm all for a level playing field. I want to see all the top players fit and ready. And then, you've got no excuses saying that he didn't beat that player or this player. So I wish him well. But yeah, like you said, Nadal was struggling towards the end of last year. Even when he was fit, he was then getting beat by players that he wouldn't normally get beat to. Fritz, is obviously you mentioned, he beat him in the Indian World Masters, which wouldn't normally happen. So yeah, but I do wish him well. I hope he gets back to full fitness, and I'd love to see Djokovic play Nadal again, and whatever play hard or grass, bring it on.
Maybe the Australian Open next year, he might make it back for then.
I think So I think that's what he said. I think he said he's going to plan to play next year as his final year. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, Pavvy, it's been an absolute blast having you along on the middle of this week anyway, and we hope to see you again, of course, without a doubt. And Pavvy has agreed to come on to us on our SportsView program on a Monday night, and we can send you the link. You have no problem coming in anyway. So it's we use StreamYard, which I find the easiest of all, to use. That's what we're using here on SportsView. So from Pavvy Gill and for myself, Pat, until we meet again, Pavvy, take care and have a great tennis week. 2 weeks.
See you soon.